Okay, let's get started here. And just to kick this off, I don't know anything about microaggressions. I don't look at this in any specific light. I just look at it as the value of a human being. This article loads this up, and it talks about LGBTQ communities. We're just referencing this, and the reason I'm saying this is because, people may blow something out of proportion. We're just talking about an article.
Yeah, and I would ask that you would, instead of having it concerned with you, that you would look at it in that other person, in service to someone else.
Yeah.
Whenever you have an LGBTQ teen,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we're going to talk about, the Trevor Project. In 2019, they did a study, and this is crazy, Alex. LGBTQ youth with at least one accepting adult in their life were 40% less likely to report a suicide attempt in the previous year.
Okay, first of all, suicide bums me out. Nobody wants anybody else to end somebody else's life or their own life.
Right.
Okay? Nobody, quitting an experience like that, that's a shame. Everybody wants, frankly, I would love to have everybody around, one big old family. But people do find themselves, and, I don't know much about suicide or the mental states, but people do find themselves contemplating ending their lives.
Right.
And this data here is showing that if somebody can step in to show that they care, show that they're being supportive and that they'll listen,
Mm-hmm.
you can decrease a suicidal thought by 40% across that community.
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
Well, they believe that 1.8 million LGBTQ youth in America seriously consider suicide each year.
Yeah, so you have 1.8 million people contemplating
Almost
suicide.
2 million
Okay.
teens.
Think about this data here. You have 1.8 million contemplating suicide, and they have outreach groups. And this one here at this Trevor Foundation only has 600 people to 1.8 million. That ratio is way, way, way out of scale. So their context here is like, how do we use all of these data inputs, these interactions of conversation with these 1.8 million Americans in this community, and how do we apply that to a machine learning system to create an artificial intelligence feedback that can act as that caring, supporting, listening adult?
Yeah, and they took all their previous conversations because, it's mostly done through text, which is the median that, somebody that is at that age group that would be hurting would want to speak to, especially if they're not willing to share with their friends or family.
Yeah.
So to be able to remain anonymous and be able to have this ability to be able to speak, whether it's an AI or a counselor, but they can take all of this information and they can put it into machine learning, and then this AI can begin to learn how these human counselors interacted with this. And it can learn this much, with these. So you have 600 counselors every day interacting through text with these teenagers. And then now you have this AI learning each of those inputs. And then it's going to be able to carry on conversations just like that. And it could do it, you could have 6 billion counselors then.
Yeah. And then if you think about it, it's not to replace counselors, but maybe when the conversation gets to a point of elevation, the system would then trigger and be like, I think we should speak to a real human being now.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that allows one of those 600 within that workflow to actually handle it and take that direct time with that person that may be having those, albeit, not good thoughts.
Well, I mean, and I want to get more macro with this because I think this is a huge project in the sense of looking at the role of AI with humanity.
I agree. This plays into a lot of very strong metaphors too, for how we even choose to interact person to person. And now there's going to be an interaction between, AI on servers with individuals. And the big thing about that is like baking in like this idea of being inclusive. Remove machines out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Bye. Assume we don't have the internet, none of that stuff. Do we have trouble being inclusive in our own communities?
Oh yeah, of course, 100%. Yes.
All the time, right? So I'm asking. And it's it's kind of like a pretty obvious question. It's rhetorical here, because the answer is yeah. Well, now we're towing into a thing that is efficient at being many different people at once, and so you got to make sure that if you are starting to magnify upon something that is going to have a greater outreach, you got to make sure that it is really inclusive, that we've totally thought through how this thing processes.
Yeah, because I mean, even Elon Musk, he talks about this is his biggest fear. So, you know, and one of my favorite movies, Ex Machina, you know,
film.
yeah, when you see, you know, and I know there's some over exaggeration on AI with that looking like a human and all that, but when you see what did that AI do, and what was the premise of the whole movie, is the AI took a weakness
Mm-hmm.
and valued emotion as a weakness,
And then exploited
and
that
then
against the human.
exploited that as a human. And so, if we're gonna have AI interact with our suicidal teens,
It cannot do exploitation.
yes,
It cannot create exclusion.
That's, you know, and then that's what they was finding that it was doing. You
Well,
know, the one, what was the one? I want to
It
make
was
sure.
the one in South Korea they led to example
Right.
of. I think I highlighted in there. What did it say?
I want to make sure, yeah, that we're on the right one. The chatbot uses GPT for its baseline conversation abilities. That model is trained on 45 million pages from the web.
Okay, so OpenAI, this very awesome setup.
Yeah, the GPT-3 is the good one.
GPT-2 is currently being used, you know, went through a bunch of stuff to almost take inputs from the internet to learn from itself to enhance the AI algorithm. Pretty smart concept. I forget what the guy's name is that he wears the fedoras that we talk about.
Oh, yeah. Super cool guy. Yeah, he's
Super
like leading
cool.
AI guy.
And so because it's open source, a lot of people can jump on and use it. And so, you know, in this stage 2 one, it was learning. But
Lee Luda was the chat.
It was in South Korea. It was called the Lee Luda chatbot.
It was a 20-year-old university student.
Well, it became a 20-year-old university student in that context. So what it was doing is it was taking inputs from a specific group of people. And then it was doing that. It was actually learning like bad behaviors and exclusivities and the way we interact outside of interacting with a machine.
Right.
Some of the more, you know, abysmal or negatively oriented, you know, thoughts, actions, and words that we use as human beings were being embedded into this algorithm.
Yeah, the article, this is what the article said. It said it embedded deeply racist, sexist, and homophobic ideas.
Right. And that's not the algorithm.
That's it learning from
That's it learning from
us.
people that are deeply sexist or whatever. I forget what the 3 things were on there, right? That's an issue. So when designing the algorithm, the AI, it needs to be able to flag something that may be a biasy, something that may have that sort of negative orientation that creates exclusivity and not inclusiveness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect
sense. And so
sense.
when the Trevor Foundation moves into the GTP3, the next evolution of this OpenAI, they're very conscious about how that algorithm is being inclusive so that as they're having these conversations and it's creating its own sort of chatbot to respond back to these 1.8 million individuals, that it doesn't start to become biased, racist, homophobic, any of those specific things, because you're already dealing with a community that is in a targeted spotlight.
Right.
They have, you know, sensitive emotional states because of the way they're thinking, contemplating suicide. Okay. You have 1.8 million people contemplating suicide. The last thing you want to do is start to attack them more.
Right.
When you thought your machine was doing good.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I want to get into a greater state of this, Alex. When you look at these AIs interacting with, you know, sensitivity towards humans, there's also a positive side, because there's also a positive side, because if I could have an AI that was a psychologist, that would be free or very inexpensive. So I wouldn't have to pay.
Because we know psychologists are expensive.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, and what was it the other day? Oh, we were talking yesterday in Santa Fe.
Yeah.
How many psychologists and psychiatrists are up in Santa Fe?
All the doctors are psychologists.
Yeah. So you know, if of course I'm not upper middle class where I can afford, you know, something like this. You know, if I'm middle class, lower middle class, and
what resource do you have?
Yeah, what resource do I have? And then I'm able to have total privacy and talk to an AI, because if I know the AI's smart and understands, I may be more apt to talk to the AI over a real person.
Especially if it's programmed not to have a bias.
Even if I knew that it's an AI, I may actually favorably want to talk to an AI because I know that it's not a genuine person. You see what I'm saying? So I would open up more to an AI. Because even me as a person, I feel like I would open up more. This is really interesting. I feel like I would open up more to an AI because it's not a human.
You have better context on this than I would through your own life.
Oh, like on the emotional state?
No, I'm just saying you and your preference.
Oh, yeah. But I'm older than you, so which is interesting.
Yeah, So I'm
There's safety in talking to an AI thing.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be
If I can presume
fearful of rejection.
Yeah.
Because I'm talking to someone I would just look at the AI as like, you've just taken vast amounts of knowledge. You have more knowledge than any human could ever have.
Sure.
Let me try to tap into your knowledge to figure out this problem that I have.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I would look at it. And I know you wouldn't judge me because you're an AI.
Yeah. I think it's just a really interesting dynamic. So I just think there has to be flags and fail-safes in there that create disunifying outputs, right? Non-harmonious outputs.
I think it's responsibility.
It's the responsibility of people designing
Google or wherever they make, because they bought out these guys.
DeepMind.
Yeah, Google and all those scientists to be able to say, how can we make this system inclusive?
That's and when you think about designing systems around data that everybody's interacting with, you got to make sure it's inclusive. Like if it's not inclusive, you're exacerbating the negative aspects of the climate or the ability for people to get access to education. Educational access is an inclusive thing. Human rights, giving those and recognizing them is an inclusive.
Well, you have a problem because you know as well as I do. If you take an AI right now, the smartest AI out there, and you plug in all the worst problems, and then you put climate stability in there, it's going to tell you one thing:
get rid of human beings.
It's going to say and it'll get real strategic and say what areas we need to get rid of human beings most.
I bet you someone's done that.
Oh, they have.
They just don't talk about it.
No, they're not going to talk about it, but
I bet you it has.
So, okay, we can't do that. We can't have an AI just eradicating people in South America to protect the jungles.
Yeah, it's got to be an inclusive thing. How do you solve while being inclusive rather than solve being exclusive?
Yes.
It's been such a thing in our brief technological evolution that everything we do is destructive. It's all about these ideas of separation. Our nuclear technology is about splitting atoms, not bringing them together. Our advanced digital marketing is about, not us at TARTLE, but just in general, the market itself, is about putting people in buckets, separating them. Laws deal with separation.
Yes.
We put borders on our countries, deals with separation, right? We put gas in our cars. It's not about creating something, it's about using something and then it's spent. It's always destruction.
Yes.
It's almost sucking a resource away rather than fusing it to create a new type of energy.
But think how much instead of being in cooperation with it, we're always fighting, pressure, pulling, pushing. You see what I'm saying? It's just, and I know that's part of evolution, but it's just so interesting to me to see this concept that humans have where we have to fight everything.
Constantly fighting. Why is it we're always fighting nature or we're fighting cancer? Don't make it a fight. No learning has ever happened really in fighting. It's just combating one negative against another negative. What happens when you have this double resonance going on here?
Well, it also has the ability to be able to, instead of fight that, what you have a perceived enemy, is to be able to say, how can I learn from this enemy?
Yeah.
And how can they teach me?
I don't want to fight cancer. I want to integrate with it so I can understand how to balance it, right? It's just...
Cancer doesn't have an emotion.
No, it's systems.
It's like coronavirus.
It's just systems that get out of balance. And so don't chop it up and burn it out and do this and separate. Find a way to bring your thoughts and people and humanity and your algorithms, everything together to unify.
Yeah, and we want to do a huge shout out, and we'd love to have them on the show, is for the Trevor Project.
I'd love to talk to them. The fact that someone is focused on this and they're worried about making sure that the algorithm is inclusive.
Yes.
They see the weaknesses in AI.
Yeah, but the demand is so high, there's just so many teenagers, especially now, with not, I was listening to a scientist today and he's like, we don't realize the value of human touch.
Oxytocin.
And then when COVID happened, we took that away. And so now we have a group of kids that are, being stuck in their houses because that was the answer. The government's answer was stay in your house.
Separation. Again, every single time.
All governments
was
stay in your house. And even some governments were boarding people up in their house.
But it's this idea of control. And when you do that control, you separate, you disunify, you create more chaotic environments. You can't move with nature. You're just always fighting nature.
Yeah, and we're going to reach out to Trevor Project.
Yeah.
We'd love to have him on the show. That would be awesome. And we encourage everybody to go to their website.
And I would love to thank them for their work.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I would like to thank
all the volunteers.
I would like to thank the gentleman who came up with OpenAI.
Oh,
I would like to
yes.
thank Trevor Project. I'd like to thank Deep Mind for looking at the
Yes.
inclusivity, all those specific things.
Yeah, and I think this is of course, always great, an MIT article.
And I would like
So-
to thank those 1.8 million people for being a part of this world.
Yes.
Because I understand that you may be going through something difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I get that.
Yes.
But thank you for helping us learn from your situation so we can be there with you and meet you where you are.
I just love that those in that community that are displaying courage
Yeah.
with this, because for so long this has been this divisiveness that we in this world that we haven't needed, and it's created a lot of violence towards that community.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people in the community that are coming out and just being able to have this conversation and not being afraid.
Yeah.
You know, and the more conversations we have, and like Trevor Project and others, the more, and we're all about this, building bridges.
Yeah. Inclusively sharing.
Yes. Then in that moment, we can have healing.